record on this computer. Perfect. So welcome. First of all, I'm super happy that you guys have joined the first ever Solvio meetup. So let's begin. The structure of this meetup is going to be we're going to begin, and I'm going to give a kind of a 10-minute project introduction. Then there's going to be a 5-minute break, for example, and then I'm going to give a slightly longer explanation, and then another short break, and then if you guys have any questions or comments, that would be the perfect time to discuss it. So let's get to it. Just maybe one more small note. This 10 minutes, the reason it's divided is I actually want to give this, put this, for example, on YouTube as a separate thing so that like somebody can just watch 10 minutes and really get an idea what the project is going to be about. So maybe especially during this 10 minutes, if you guys have any questions, leave it for the discussion. Because this kind of, I want it to be self-contained a piece. Let's get to it. So just before we start real quick, can everyone hear me and see my screen perfectly? Can just one person confirm, please?
Yes, everything looks fine.
Awesome. Let's do it. So just a few short words about me. I studied maths and computer science at Merton College, Oxford. I dropped out after a year. I founded OXSC, which did math camps and math revision courses for IB students. So yeah, and currently I work as an engineer for Gnosis. In my free time, obviously, apart from being a learning junkie, I like life hacking stuff. I practice some spiritual practices, and I love to travel. So the first question you all have is, what is Solvio? Well, Solvio is nothing, but what will it be? So Solvio will be a decentralized education system. Now let's talk about that in more detail. While there are a number of services that together will turn this vision into reality, here I'll talk about just a particular three. So Solvio Learn is the first one, and it will be a personal curriculum producer. But it's not enough just to learn. The major problem today with self-learning is that there are very not effective ways to get credentials. Effective credentials are super important in the modern world as they work like signals. This is what makes this proposal not only a learning system, but an education system. Solvio Advanced will be a decentralized credential provider. Finally, a math step-by-step validator, which I currently call Pruvio. Also note that all the names here are provisional and should be decided collectively. Also, I use the word services here because I think it's better to refer to a product as an end product, either consumer or a B2B product. These services may have their own separate apps or be part of a single app and therefore product. So let's start with Solvio Learn. Solvio Learn will essentially be a semantic aggregator, ranker, and search engine for learning resources. Now here I use learning resource in the most generalized sense. So it could be online resources, real-life learning, or work experience. Let's look at each of these in slightly more detail. So the first possibility are online learning resources. So that can include courses from platforms like Udemy or Coursera, videos or playlists on YouTube, articles from independent blogs or from blog platforms such as Medium, or for example, ebooks from Amazon's ebook platform. It could also be a specific podcast episode or number of episodes, as well as, for example, a Stack Exchange link with an answer and some comments. So, for example, I have recently self-taught myself a few kind of very technical topics, such as computability theory and recently cryptography. And I actually found that I got the most insight by, after going through the lecture notes, looking up some very specific questions on a Stack Exchange and reading the whole discussion there. So there's questions where, if you read every single comment, it can take you an hour. But I found that reading at least some of them, or all of them, is what gave me the most understanding of the topic at hand. That's just a personal example. So how does it work currently? Currently, the web is very fragmented when it comes to recommending which way and in which order to learn. For the most common self-learning topics, which is probably programming, there exist these things called roadmaps and these things called awesome lists, mainly on GitHub. Over that, Solvio Learn will provide the following advantages. You can learn not just programming, but anything. It's also a semantic aggregator, which gives advantages for individual resources because you can filter and search by the difficulty, the possible lengths, and the quality that other people have assigned to it. You can, and then even more importantly, the interaction between the individual resources. So each resource will have a number of learning dependencies, which are also categorized by strength. Soft dependencies, it would be cool to know that if you want to study the original thing. And hard dependencies, it's very, very important that you understand, for example, modular arithmetic if you want to learn cryptography. And then not just dependencies, which is kind of going backwards, but also what topics this resource or this topic allows for. So that's going forwards. So maybe giving the student some motivation to learn something. They know that if they will learn modular arithmetic, then they will be able to learn cryptography, and then they will be able to work on decentralizing the world. And it's not only learning resources, it's also, for example, jobs. So what jobs they will be able to perform if they learn some of these topics. But all of this comes down to one main benefit: being able to produce a full learning path that is parameterized by how much the student wants to spend to achieve that particular goal, such as learning a topic or getting a job, their skill level, etc. So just to give an example, say I want to learn blockchain, and I'm a 12-year-old kid. So then the Solvio Learn app would show me the exact path to being able to achieve the knowledge to understand blockchain. So maybe I would start with some electrical engineering, move on to basic computer science and programming, then also some mathematics in the meantime as a different branch, then learn cryptography, distributed systems, and finally I can learn about blockchain. So this will produce a full learning path that can be parameterized based on whatever the student desires. So Solvio Learn won't only allow you to search online resources. The learning resources can also be real life learning. So this includes things like short-term intensive courses, such as math camps, or even conferences, whatever can be used for learning or for motivating oneself to learn. But also long-term courses, the traditional trimester, semester, or year-long courses, or for example, in the case of IB or A levels, a 2-year course. It can also include tutoring, both physical and online. So here's a side note: Solvio Learn will also be the first ever commission-free tutoring platform. So the reason that no good aggregator, no good Uber for tutoring has arisen in the last few years is essentially that the economics don't work out. Nobody wants to give for a long time thing 20% of their income to an app because they can just arrange the sessions with the student individually. But this, if it's commission free and we have an app for it, then there will actually be a positive reason to use this app long term for both the student and the teacher. Cool. So it can also be, one sec, I just, okay, good. I just had a message, so maybe I thought that the quality isn't good. The learning resources can also be work experiences. So I had a call yesterday with my really good friend, Alex, and he kind of gave me this idea. So I've incorporated it. Oh yeah, so the work experiences can either be Solvio internal, such as teaching others, grading others' works, we'll get to that in a second, or Solvio external, whether it's programming, internships, you get the idea. So we've already said that learning is not enough, and credentials are equally, if not more, as for example, the academic Brian Kaplan would argue, important. The Solvio model will allow any credential provider. This can include platforms like Udacity and Coursera, websites, content providers such as Codecademy or Khan Academy, and even credentials from the legacy education system, such as IB, SATs, or A levels. Now, the first 2 points are informal sources, so we can really use those for our system. But they not only offer credentials, but they only offer credentials in 2 areas: short answer science questions and coding. Anything that is subjective, i.e. difficult to understand for a machine, essentially all of humanities and even parts of the sciences as well, will have a problem. The solution to that will be called Solvio Advance. Additionally, we will incorporate computer algebra into these platforms. The end result will be Pruvio. So let's have a look at these two, Solvio Advance and Pruvio. Solvio Advance is a decentralized grading or credentialing system. There are numerous possibilities to offer or implement. The original idea was that you create something, for example, essays, science problems, math problems, code, podcast, presentation, whether it's a physical meetup or a virtual meetup, and you'll be graded in a peer-to-peer manner. But it can also include teaching, and even if none of this works out, if the game theory behind it doesn't work out and over iterations we find that that people are cheating, that our system is not safe or not secure. There exists a scenario where cheating is less costly than learning. Then we might introduce testing as well, or the market might introduce this, which can of course be either physical, online, or for example, one-to-one online. So how could all of this work? So for example, let's look at the peer-to-peer grading or the peer-to-peer testing. So you would think that, you might get 5 people to grade an essay on to what degree did religion cause the 30 Years' War, and then you might take the average. But the game theoretical problem with that is that the reviewers could essentially be cheating themselves. They might not read it, they might not care about it, they would just give a random grade. So this is a problem that must be solved, and I think that one of the solutions is this game theoretical concept called a Schelling game, which essentially works like this. 7 people will give it a grade. For now, let's just assume that the grade is good or bad. It's a good work or it's a bad work. And the majority of those people, since it's 9, it can't be a tie. The majority of those people will assume that they were correct, and they will get all the proceeds from whatever was the incentivization for them to actually grade it in the first place. And the others will assume that they haven't done their job, that they didn't read it, or that they reported incorrectly, and they will lose both the proceeds or possibly even a stake that they put up. So this is essentially a game theoretical solution to be able to bring real world data, such as the quality of work, onto an information technology platform such as a blockchain in a decentralized way. And then of course we could think of combining Schelling games with an average, which would probably be the best scenario. But here I just want to sketch out one possible solution. Cool, so now we discussed how Solvio Advance can work. Let's have a look at how Pruvio can work. So what is Pruvio? It's a tool that will essentially be able to understand math. So while there are many, many applications for this, the 2 most immediate ones are a step-by-step math learning process. So currently, websites like Khan Academy, they only check your answer, while this will allow to check every step and also give hints for the next step. And additionally, for high-level problems, which includes high-level problems in high school and math Olympiads, as well as all university education in mathematics. They are proof search questions rather than numeric search questions. So this will allow us to learn for those questions and also train for those questions, and also
Hello, how are you doing?
Could somebody mute themselves, please? Okay. And also get credentials for solving those problems. Sorry. Now we're getting into the next thing, which is that there are, in my opinion, so many beautiful things about this. Let me mention just a few. So in my mind, a mathematical proof is synonymous with deductive reasoning. And that is one of education's major goals. The ability for a student to learn math at their own pace, step by step, is powerful. And in my opinion, will really revolutionize math education. So this is coming from a 5-year math teacher, part-time and full-time. Another cool thing is Pruvio fits both sides of Solvio, learning and credentialing. And it will also provide incredible value independently. So I would actually be happy pursuing this as my startup if I didn't have the idea of Solvio. Anyways, we could offer the Pruvio service to schools for learning, homework, and testing, universities for entrance exams, problem set homeworks, and final exams, math Olympiads, or we could even start our own, as well as platforms that I already mentioned, like Khan Academy or Coursera. On a business level, this could be actually the deciding factor in them deciding to integrate with Solvio credentialing. So this app, if it's really cool, it will give us leverage to negotiate with them, to integrate with the Solvio system. So now we've introduced the 3 main services: Solvio Learn, Solvio Advance, and Pruvio. Now, you can see a few threads running through this discussion. Let's look at 3 of them. Let's look at the state of education. So there's informal education, which is improving super fast, but doesn't have effective credentialing. And then there's formal education, which compared to the world that we can create and live in with technology, is very rigid and inflexible. So the goal of this project is to combine the best of both worlds, to give a formal background / credentialing model to informal education. So that's really the gist of the whole project. So I described an education model, but an education model really sits on top of a learning model. Education is just learning with credentials. So what will be the specific learning model? So while in theory the Solvio model is learning agnostic, I think that it will be most suitable for, number 1, self-learning, number 2, short-term intensive courses, and number 3, short-term work. Now, there is ample evidence that short-term courses actually work better than long-term courses. I've read studies on this. The only subjects that were given as exceptions were languages and music. My response to that would be that the whoever was doing the study just wasn't creative enough. Obviously, if you're going to teach language in the same way as you teach it 5 hours per week, except you're going to teach it for 1 week, i.e. memorization and vocabulary and past tenses, you're not going to remember anything. But if we compare that, for example, to an intensive language stay, an intensive language travel, I would argue that is so much more efficient. And similar with music, if you're going to try to cram 1 hour of learning per day into 10 hours of learning per day, it's not going to work. But if you practice for 1 hour per day for a few months, and then the short-term course can be seen as a concert or a music tour, then that is much more efficient. So essentially, self-learning is limited by interest, really bounded by it, or enthusiasm. But if that's present, it's pretty much undoubtedly the most cost-efficient way to learn, because the costs are 0 or almost 0. Now, we're designing an engineering system here, and it's my belief that an engineering system the most effective solutions should really be built for, while self-learning is not possible in current formal education, precisely because there isn't a credentialing system for it. So the most efficient way to learn is not possible in the current system. While in this system, the system is actually built for it, but also allows many other forms of education. Now let's look at the third idea. So a world with high transaction costs, like the world we lived in until the advent of the internet, will lead to full-time jobs. Low transaction costs, on the other hand, enable freelancing. Now, both personal experience and professional studies have shown that freelancers are happier, more motivated, and more productive. This makes a lot of sense if you think about the way humans work and act. If you can capture your entire value, you will be much more motivated and hence happier in your work than if part of your value is captured by your boss. We merely make it possible to freelance as a teacher or as a student. And essentially, we want to sort of calibrate or standardize or maybe normalize education to the current level of technology. By the way, offhand, so a lot of the stuff that I said in this slide comes from Disruption Theory by Ben Thompson. So while we're talking about it, value tends to be captured by service providers in a world with high transaction costs. So that's why up until 1990, the time that the internet was invented, newspapers, hotels, taxi companies, universities, all of these captured a lot of the value because there was no way to achieve the real content without going through the content provider. But now that we have the internet and transaction costs are very low, then those the power of those institutions is being disrupted. And essentially, you can think of Solvio as the Uber or the Airbnb for education. And also, the disruption theory predicts that value will be accumulated by essentially aggregators. So yeah, Uber, Airbnb, Google for articles, or Facebook for articles. And those are the aggregators are those who control the entry point of the consumer experience. So that's our goal, to be the go-to app for looking up anything to learn. Cool. And that's the end of part one. So let's take a few minutes break, maybe 3 minutes, and let's begin very shortly with part two. Okay, everyone here?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect.
Well, I'm not everyone, but I'm here.
Anyone else here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Hey.
Hey.
I missed the first maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
Sorry?
I missed the first section about Solvio.
Oh, no worries. It was all recorded. I'll
Yeah,
send the link after.
I'll go back and check up on it.
Yeah. So shall we continue?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So now let's go a little bit more in depth. The goal of this section will be to go a little bit more in depth. The main points will be advantages of the system that I just described, and also the best path of executing or achieving it. Now, forgive me for not having everything worked out. I never actually got the chance to work on this full time, but it's pretty much 1 day per week right now. And so when we talk about execution, there's several different accounts. There's the team, the products, the sales or the usage or the revenue or the adoption rate. And then there's things like supporters, advisors, sponsors. And it's hard to predict each of them. So essentially, I'll only focus on the products. Yeah. So rather than giving like milestones, like milestone 1, have this team, have this product, have this usage, and have this amount of funding, I'll just talk about the product. As such, this section contains a little bit more speculation than the previous one. The exact decisions will be determined how things go and or user testing. So let's get into it. So I was going to start with disadvantages for the Solvio model, and I actually couldn't think of any. So you might say something like people don't have enough responsibility to be able to make their own decisions. But I mean, I would just counter that with 2 or 3 things. So I think that the current education system doesn't create responsible people, really, precisely because it doesn't require any responsibility. So one of the problems with the current education system that businessmen or other people have expressed is that people tend to be naive about how the world actually works and irresponsible. So I feel that that's actually an advantage. Will create responsible people, and more importantly, at the end of the day, it depends on the age as well. A child's like a 16-year-old education is to some degree decided by their parents, so it's not necessary to give them the full freedom if they can't handle it. I think we should assume freedom, but if we're proven wrong, then the parents might want to make some decisions as well. And finally, there's 2 things. Number one is the fact that you might have, for example, a director of studies that will actually oversee your entire education, or mentor. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that I think our system is set up to use a student's natural enthusiasm the best for them to really be able to learn about whatever they want to learn. And by definition, they want to learn about what they want to learn. So this freedom aspect to it, and also motivation, because with the Solvio Learn thing, you'll be able to see what you have to learn in order to achieve something else, whether it's learning another topic or getting a particular job. So people might not know why they're learning number theory in their first year of university. But if they can clearly see that 10,000 other people around the world have all expressed that number theory is critical to understanding cryptography, then that might be motivation for them to actually learn it, or the fact that they'll be able to get a particular job with it. So that's pretty much all I could found, and it's not a very good argument either. So now let's look at the advantages of this system. So actually, there's so many advantages of this system, and I could probably categorize them and write an article about the top 100 advantages of Solvio. But since a comprehensive summary is not possible in this time that we have, I will put forth only a few. And they're essentially a combination of rigorous and colloquial or personal experience evidence. So the first one is that more and more smart, creative, or successful people are dropping out of school. Now, I'm not talking only about Dell, Zuck, Richard Branson, Gates, Jobs, but also people in my own life, my friends. Out of some of the most intelligent or accomplished people that I know, about 9 of them are dropouts. I recently made a list. I don't want to make it public. Also, public figures like Vitalik Buterin and respected public figures like Peter Thiel. He set up this thing called Thiel's Fellowship, which gives 100 grand for a smart person that will drop out of college. So Peter Thiel is so convinced by this idea that college is a waste of your life, which I not necessarily agree with, but he's very convinced about it, that he's willing to give his own money, no strings attached, if you actually drop out. Fun fact, so Vitalik Buterin was one of those that dropped out and got 100 grand and built Ethereum. So all of this comes down to one thing. It's evidence that schools have not adapted fast enough, arguably. Another example. So I haven't had the personal experience of this for years, but as far as I remember, Oxford term begins in October, and as far as I remember, the applications have to be sent out in October as well, the previous year. So if you think about it, if you decide at the end of October that you wanna study at Oxford or Cambridge, then you have to wait a year to be able to apply, and then a year to get processed and actually begin studying. And if you think about it, the earliest you can actually start studying from your decision is in 12 months. So the fact that it takes on average 1.5 years before your decision and you begin actually learning anything is in today's world of low transaction costs ridiculous. And another example would be an area like programming, where there's actually companies propping up that all they do is they say, hey, if you're a CTO or a lead developer or a CEO of a software company, you don't care where the person went to college. You care more about his programming skills. So there's a company, for example, HackerRank, that's all they do. They sell to companies like Amazon this service where people go and they solve coding questions, and based on their performance, they're able to immediately land an interview with a big software firm. And I hear that TripleByte is doing something similar as well. I'll give you just a few more examples. So, because I'm a total geek, I was recently taking a Coursera on information theory, and the professor there, what he stated was that he used to think that a blackboard is the best way to teach mathematics, but when he saw Salman Khan's academy, he was proven wrong. So he considers writing with a graphical tablet Khan Academy style to be a better way to teach and to learn mathematics than in a traditional classroom setting. And I can totally agree with that. I learned for my further maths IB exam just from Khan Academy. Another argument could be that there's possibly not enough expertise among teachers to justify this model of one teacher per 20 students. Examples of that would be English. So, for example, the Czech government has certain standards about the level of English that people should have when they take their high school exam. And once they introduce these nationwide examinations called státní maturita, they realize that people actually don't have those skills on average. And the solution for that is not easily seen because there are not enough native English speakers to be able to go to Czech Republic to teach in every single public or private school here so that the students actually get a native teacher. And it's even less so possible in much bigger countries like China. So the argument I'm making here is that part of this self-education slash short-term learning, for example, traveling for short-term intensive courses, will be that you'll be able to collaborate on education with anyone, anytime, including in English. So one of the secondary benefits is an open education system for anyone in the world for free. This could also include new areas. So, for example, blockchain. There might not be enough blockchain professors at every single computer science department in the world, which limits the learning of blockchain area, or intersections of areas. While we have great economics teachers and history teachers, maybe an intersection course like economic history might not be no one in the teaching staff of a high school might be qualified to teach that. Or it could be, for example, math Olympiad training. So that's just an example that I just came up with right now. Not every school in the world has teachers who are qualified to do that. I'm super privileged that I went to schools where there were such teachers. But we want to scale this privilege for free. And then this final note that I have, spread of new ideas could be faster. This ideas about learning, experimentation with learning methods. I mean, just, I'm saying this all in a very high level, abstract way. But if we were to brainstorm some examples, we could come up with really, really cool stuff about what you can do with short-term intensive courses. And even ideas about the world. This will allow spread of new ideas in a much faster manner than is presently possible. Cool, so let's talk about execution. So there's essentially three options we have. Number one, for profit. Number two, either for profit or non-profit, but have a token, a blockchain token. And number 3 is nonprofit without a token. Now, while even this decision is up for collective decision, I preliminarily decided to start it as a fully nonprofit project. And the advantages of this are, I think really, really big. I think that people nevertheless be motivated to work on this project, because I've seen that on myself, how I am motivated to work on this. It's pretty much the most important thing in our world is education, maybe save for, I don't know, energy consumption of the world. And then there's a lot of implementation advantages, such as much less regulation and worry about that in the first place, versus doing an ICO, etc. And most importantly, no crypto economics or tokenomics. So what I mean by that is, if you have a token, you also have to figure out the tokenomics so that your token actually makes sense. And it hasn't been proven that the tokenomics of existing projects actually do make sense. So, and then there's this side note, which is, worry about actually delivering a return to the investors. And also, it's essentially best for the end goal, which I will discuss very, very soon. What's the end goal of Solvio? And essentially, it comes down to priorities. For me, anything that increases the chances of this happening should be taken. So for me, this project isn't about making a lot of money. It's about making it happen. And a lot of people, maybe when they go into business, their order of priorities are: number 1, me; number 2, the company; number 3, the goal of the company; and number 4, some kind of public good. So for me personally, it's in the exact reverse order. So public good is actually most important, then the goal of the company, which is to decentralize education, then the company itself, and then me. And this does not mean that the key people in the company will not be incentivized to do good work. So according to the jurisdictions of most countries, nonprofit institutions are allowed to pay a competitive salary to the key people in the company. So obviously, if we don't succeed and the company has 3 employees, then the salary will be much, much lower than if we make this happen. And it's a really, really big and flourishing company. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. So now let's look at the actual steps taken. So I'm starting an Estonian nonprofit. I talked to lawyers in Switzerland, but I realized that to bootstrap the project, Estonia is a much better choice. Now let's talk about finances. So I expect the major of the finances to be from donations. So there's this thing called the Ethereum Community Fund that we could potentially apply to. There's also this series of hackathons called ETH Global, for example, ETH Berlin. That essentially, if you place in the top 8 or top 10 at the hackathon, you get $70,000. So essentially, that's enough money to bootstrap a company. So that's another possible way of getting finance for this project. Also, apply to some actual incubators or accelerators. The ones that I have in mind most strongly are Entrepreneur First in London, United Kingdom, which I think is a really, really cool project, or the Zaid Business School Incubator at the University of Oxford. So I had a presentation for BlockSock a few years ago, and after the presentation, the guy came up to me and he said that he's the director of this incubator, and that if I ever want to apply to it, I should get in touch with him. So I have some contact there. And this would be really, really good because it would also, this connection with the university would increase the chances that we're able to land a deal with the university itself. And finally, the most famous incubator of all, the Y Combinator. You might ask, how could these incubators fund us? We don't have any equity by definition. There can be no dividends taken from a nonprofit organization by law. So the answer is that these incubators might look into funding us, even if we're nonprofit. For them, it would be a way to, as charity. So Y Combinator is already doing this. So about 5 years ago, they started funding nonprofits, and they funded quite a lot of them. And as I said, essentially, so you go through the entire same program as all the other startups, and you get the same amount of money, but you don't give up any equity. So it's essentially, on their part, charity. Alternatively, we could look into some philanthropists that are very interested in education, offer this to them as the solution. And if they're interested in this project and they see the vision, then they might be interested in putting in their own resources, time, financial, to make this happen. So, for example, in Czechia, there's a man called Karel Janeček who funds so many education projects, especially science ones, because he comes from a mathematics background. There's also a man called Martin Roman, who used to be the CEO of ČEZ, the biggest Czech company, who is recently looking into education, has been founding a school for the 21st century. And in the US, I just listed a few people that are very interested in education. So Tim Draper has his own university. Peter Thiel has his fellowship. Fred Wilson writes about education on his blog. I only recently discovered it, planning to read more about it. And even for example, Bill Gates, who is a major philanthropist, the biggest philanthropist in the world, is looking more and more into education. For example, he funded or continues to fund Khan Academy, which is also a nonprofit. And then finally, individuals. So actually, as part of thinking about this project, I came up with this idea of collective giving. It's essentially a smart contract where you give money, ether, and but the other party can take it only if a specified number of other people have also given. So, for example, I want to donate to a charity, so I will give them $1,000, but I will only give it to them if 999 other people do so. So it's essentially a way of getting past what you might call a free rider problem in charities. That it's not very good economically for you to give, but it's kind of good for, or you would want the whole society to give. because this essentially multiplies each of your donations by a factor of 1,000. So instead of giving 1,000, you'll be giving 1,000,000. And there's a lot of reason for us to accept donations primarily in cryptocurrencies. I only read one article about this, which was from the US. So I'm not sure how this applies to other jurisdictions, but I think it was in the US. Anyways, I just literally read one article. It was saying that if you donate in money, then the nonprofit has to pay capital gains taxes or some form of taxes on that. And that gets deducted from your donation when you want to lower your taxes, essentially get a tax break for the donation. So there's two bad things happening here. The company gets less money than you gave them because you have to pay taxes off of it, and you get to deduct less from your taxes as a result than you otherwise would, according to the amount that you're actually giving. So, and the comparison was with if you give in Bitcoins, the taxes are only another form of taxes, which is much lower, and you will be able to actually deduct the entire amount. So that's much, much better. Cool. So now, another form of funding would be revenue. So I've already mentioned the project Pruvio, a math step-by-step validator. If we're able to offer this to existing platforms, schools, universities, all the stakeholders that I mentioned, that might generate some revenue, as well as governments. So if a government decides that they want to use Solvio as an alternative, but yet fully formal education system, then this service of integrating everything, bringing it into their country, translating it, and bootstrapping it might generate a lot of revenue. And I actually just thought of a third revenue source, which would be, in a second, I'll talk about this thing called Decentralized Education Ecosystem, or DEE. And if a lot of companies from that are very successful, then they might want to donate to the Solvio Foundation so to continue working on this protocol. That's essentially the equivalent of donating, for-profit companies such as Red Hat, Microsoft, etc. They fund open source projects so that they can keep their own servers going. Oh, and I should also mention all of the projects that I've discussed so far, Solvio Learn and Solvio Advance, the plan is for them to be open source software, but the plan is for Pruvio not to be open source software. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one is it's not a blockchain app. It's a fully centralized thing. It's an algorithm, essentially. It's what's in academia called computer algebra, programming computers for them to understand algebra and logic and math proofs. But and then the second reason was that it will actually possibly allow us to generate revenue. So there is incentive not to make it open source software. So if we get any donations, we want to make it clear to the donors that we're doing everything we can to maximize their donation. So that means if they fund Pruvio, then to keep it closed source so that it can generate revenue, that's what it would mean. Oh, and there's also one more thing I just thought of that I wanted to say. Whoa. Oh yeah, I don't have any sort of no, like certainty that I will be the best person to run this project. So I just wanted to say I'm also fine with somebody else becoming the CEO, whether it's an external person with more experience or something like that. So yeah, for example, Vitalik Buterin, um, he chose the job of the chief scientist of the Ethereum Foundation because that's the job that he wanted, while he let another person do the day-to-day execution. Okay, now let's talk briefly about the team. So part of the Solvio project is this idea that people are more happy, motivated, productive, very, very bright illustration as freelancers. That's what I essentially explained earlier. And so if this is true, then it also has implications for the structuring of the company. For example, I believe that services like Upwork, TopTal, and recently Gitcoin offer better cost efficiency, better bang for buck than hiring most people full time. So, for example, when it comes to Pruvio, obviously, if you know, it will require some research, some deep research. This is the one of the projects that is the most deep tech. Um, and the lead researchers then that cannot be externalized, but something like making a front end application, a web app or a mobile app, what you could do with is go on GitHub, create a repository saying Pruvio React Native, and make an issue saying, you know, I want this project and here's the specifications, and then put it on Gitcoin, and you would attach a bounty of, I don't know, $50,000 for making a mobile app, and they would send it to 10,000 developers that they have, and you would communicate. You would pick one of them, and then you would review their work, and if it was good, you would close the issue. And as soon as you close the issue, they're able to get the ether from a smart contract. So it's essentially a decentralized way where you can pay an ether for doing freelance open source development. So that's pretty cool. And additionally, it would be pretty great to get some high profile figures as advisors, supporters, co-founders. That would really lubricate the project quite a lot. So me personally, I'll begin working on this part-time from March 1st. So I told my boss at Gnosis that I'll start working part-time from 1st of March. But I do have some things to finish up at work, so I'll probably leave the company sometime at the end of the year when I can begin working full-time. And I'm essentially looking for co-founders, which I define as someone that can join within a year and a half. Because, yeah. if I join in December, then maybe a few more months. But if the person can only join after than that, then maybe that's not considered co-founding position. So yeah, and now let's talk about some of the products. So I want to talk about IPEF, which I didn't have a chance to go into in the first 10-minute summary. So a very quick note on the terminology framework versus system. So a framework for me is a frame for work. And for me, it's more general than a system. This also goes in line with the use of the word for example, a front-end JavaScript framework. You might think of the app as an engineering system, and you might think of the libraries that it is using, such as React.js, as a framework. Now, I would like to introduce IPEF, which stands for the Interplanetary Education Framework. The name is inspired by recent blockchain projects, such as the Interplanetary File Storage, IPFS, and the Interplanetary Database, IPDB. And it's essentially the most generic layer for education credentials. So IPEF will serve as the most generic layer for education credentials. Any authority can submit a credential or certification for a student. This concept generalizes all education systems. For example, the traditional Czech maturita, a high school might submit grades like 1, 1, and 3 for the appropriate subjects. For a centralized education system like SAT, A-levels, or the IB, there would be a controlling authority that would do the same. Now, there's no requirement of compatibility between the grading schemas, because there's no a priori way to make an A-level grading schema compatible. The whole idea is to do this on the blockchain. The advantage is pretty simple: to reduce education/CV fraud, and hence increase trust in society. There are a few projects trying to accomplish this already. We could work with one of them, or all of them, to make such a simple standard. Can somebody mute? Okay. Yes. Let's talk about Solvio in practice. So there's essentially 3 stages. Number 1, consumer. We create products, learning products, for self-learners and students. Number 2, schools, teachers, and universities. This is when we build out the platform. We can also persuade universities to open up learning resources, for example, lecture notes. This is one thing that is kind of personal to me, because whenever I try to learn a technical topic like computability theory or cryptography, well, less so with computer science, but with mathematics, one of the best ways is to read lecture notes, actually, because math is so rigorous and goes step by step, axiom to theorem to corollary, that just lecture notes tend to be a very, very good way. Oftentimes because the particular Coursera doesn't exist. I haven't compared that yet, because there is no Coursera on some very deep tech topics yet. And I love the fact that Oxford Maths Institute has all of its lecture notes and all of its problem sheets absolutely open, going back the last 12 years. So essentially, anyone that wants to learn math, you should go to maths.ox.ac.uk or something like that. Courses.maths.ac.ox.uk, and you can see all of the lecture notes and all of the homework sheets that as if you were a student of Oxford. The Oxford Computer Science Department doesn't have this, which is very unfortunate. Luckily, the Cambridge one does. So if you want to learn computer science, then you go to the Cambridge, I think they call it the computer laboratory, and you can see all of the lecture notes for every single year for the past 10 years. So essentially, that's really, really good, and that's super cool. I don't like it when the opposite is true. Universities, which also take a lot of public funding, silo out their education and worry only about their students rather than what they could reach so many more people by not requiring an email and password. So one of the side projects actually could be this sort of open lecture note or learning database where which would be a project for universities to open up some of their siloed yet excellent resources. And also, so the last stage of the project, this is the end goal that I mentioned earlier, and now I'm actually going to explain it, is to sell to governments. So what do I mean by sell to governments? I mean that the Solvio model is recognized and acknowledged as equivalent to a formal education. By the way, can you guys still hear me? Can somebody?
Yep, everything's working fine.
Perfect. I just wanted a little reality check that everything is being recorded and stuff. Cool. So so there could be a few examples of this. Number one is that the Solvio credentialing system is accepted as equivalent when it comes to visas or immigration into a country. So if you want to get a U.S. green card, or if you want to get H-1B, currently you have to have completed a master's degree. So if we say that alternatively, you would have gotten this many points in the Solvio Advance, then you can get an H-1B. That would be really good for America. Another example is to get equivalent with formal education for the use of to get corporate or government jobs. And most importantly, for funding. So the goal of this project right now is that we are better than traditional formal education without getting any funding from governments. But once we, if they will allow that, that's when this system will really, really be able to expand. By that, I mean this concept of school vouchers, where you could decide not to enroll in the public education system, such as a high school or a public university, and instead the money that you save the public education system, you could channel that into Solvio. So this idea is very, very long. I'm not. So it was really promoted by Milton Friedman. I'm not sure if he came up with it or if he merely promoted it, but it's a really good idea that essentially gives students and consumers choice when it comes to picking what they want to study, how they want to study, and with who they want to study it with. And for governments, another advantage of Solvio over traditional education is that the way they work, they essentially have a binary certification system, don't they? Like if you're a private college, you can either provide this bachelor for this course or you can't. Now it's a big dilemma for the government of where to set that standard. Do we want 30% of the youth to have a bachelor's degree or 70%? So essentially, this is a kind of a problem of central planning, isn't it? And what you could do with this is you could have it be much more fluid. Why do we need bachelor's degree? There could be another app called Solvio Profile, which would essentially serve as a profile page for your Solvio Advance account. And for example, your potential employer that you just applied to could see exactly what you've been learning in the last 15 years, possibly. And then you could obviously set the privacy settings so that you control over if they see only the results or the details or the individual essays or even the individual calendar results, as in what day were you working on which problem. All of that can be either displayed in detail or reduced to a single number. And as far as I know, Solvio is the first project with that serves as a decentralized education system with the goal to eventually get acknowledged by governments. And that's really the end goal. And that's also one of the reasons why this is a nonprofit project, because we feel that it will be easier to sell to governments if we don't have a token, rather than if we complicate everything by having a token. While we're talking about blockchain, I just realized there's one more thing that I forgot to say. Part of having doubt in myself, I also have doubt in the whole company if we're able to execute this well. And so one of the aspects is that ideally this stuff will be done on a public database, securing your information with cryptography rather than by trusting a centralized party. A decentralized database. I'm not sure if I said that's what I want to say, such as IPDB. So what this would mean is that the Solvio app would essentially be just a front end for a certain public database, and then if the company of the team has bad performance, this poorly, somebody else could provide an app that would be equally good or better. So essentially, I think the model that I thought hard about it, we should go about it the way the Bitcoin Foundation does. They're the most like, or the Ethereum Foundation, very, very decentralized, or a fully centralized thing like Airbnb. Everything is on centralized servers. Everything is one app. And I really think that this, what I just elaborated, is the best of both worlds, because consumers, one thing that I learned from the blockchain world is it's really easy. It's much easier to onboard consumers when there's only one brand. So if people want to learn about Ethereum, then there's they have to buy Ether, right? So there's Coinbase, and then they have to use MetaMask to actually use an app. So there's all these different products and brands essentially that really, for the user in their eyes, complicate the onboarding process. While if you go to Airbnb, you put in your email and your password and you click register, that's much easier, right? So the idea that I'm proposing is that it's a combination of both. There's one brand, one mobile app and web app called Solvio. But also, if we do poorly, anyone else can build a front-end app. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to say. Cool, so now let's talk about the products. So the first one is oh, even before we talk about products, there's 2 more slides. Yay. So one of the things that I'm the most excited about is what I call the decentralized education ecosystem, or DE for short. So you've already seen 3 products of it, Solvio Learn, Solvio Advance, and Pruvio. But there's like just countless, like every day I get new ideas about products and apps that would contribute to realizing decentralizing education. I'll give you a few examples. A social network where, so this would essentially integrate with Solvio Advance. So you would for example, put that you want to learn something as a goal. Other people could, whatever, cheer you up in that goal, or it would just work that the way that you achieved something, you got a certain credential, you produced a certain essay of a certain quality, or you solved some problems in Pruvio, that would get automatically posted there, and other people could, whatever, give you high five, whatever the love or like button would be. So this is one possibility. I have actually some ideas about how a social network might work much better than Facebook. I think so. One of those is it wouldn't actually show other people who liked your posts. So this could potentially reduce this whole ego mania that some people, or a lot of people, at least a little bit deep inside, have about posting on social networks, because the only person who would see that you've liked something is the other person. So it'd be much more of a private connection rather than an egoistic thing. And next, it would also serve, the second app that I wanted to give it as an example is an aggregate of learning frameworks. So this is actually really important. In this whole presentation, as I said, I've been pretty high level and abstract, but the reason is because I'm designing the system, and the system has to be as generic as possible. But when we actually get, hands down, then how are people actually going to learn? What's the best way, right? And now there's so many people, whether it's Tim Ferriss or like a lot of people that I don't know the name of, that have these frameworks for how to learn anything and how to study and stuff like that. So this will actually come into real use in Solvio, and then even more advanced ones about an actual whole education, not just a skill or losing weight or learning to cook. So it's essentially the idea that I'm trying to put across is this idea of people creating these learning frameworks, and then other people, using them, testing them, and there being some rating system or marketplace for these learning frameworks. Another possible thing is a school or a tutor dashboard. So if you're a member of Airbnb, then if you switch to hosting in the app, then their UX is just magnificent. You see how much you've earned in the last month. You see a calendar for who's coming. So something like that for tutors or even schools, right? Or like a personal learning calendar. Essentially, every evening it will send you notification of what you're going to learn, what you should be doing the next day. Because if we self-learning requires a lot of discipline, day-to-day discipline, time-wise. So this could serve. It will structure all the stuff you have to learn, like math morning, computer science afternoon, and it will send you appropriate notifications. And then it would also tell you, oh, and then on Tuesday you've got to go to a course, or you're being tutored by someone. And finally, an Airbnb for students of Solvio. So one of the things that Solvio gives rise to is traveling to learn for short-term courses. And there's lots of reasons why we wouldn't want 16-year-old kids traveling by themselves in Europe or the US. So this might be a slightly more regulated version of Airbnb, where we actually hold interviews with every single person who wants to host. They have to provide their criminal record, or I should say lack of thereof, in order to qualify to be able to host these students. Or alternatively, some kind of exchange program where one student goes to another person's house and they exchange places. So now let's discuss something super duper important, and that's the actual possible learning systems. So I didn't have a lot of time for this slide, as you can see, but basically, essentially, the idea is to start in big cities. So the reason is that, traveling for short-term courses is great, but it's also expensive, time-wise and money-wise, for a lot of people. So I think that this model shines the best in areas where you can go to not only one school, one high school, or one university like you do now, but to any in your proximate region, without having to change accommodation. So essentially, the idea is you live in New York City or you live in Prague, and you go to a school, but actually around you, within that same mile radius, there's 13 schools. So instead of going to just one school, you could pick the courses and the teachers that you want from any of those 13 schools, these short-term courses. So that's why I think that the biggest potential is starting in big cities, because there's high liquidity and people don't have to travel, or I should say change accommodation when they change schools. And then another point about the learning system, I've already mentioned that it's very likely that there could be another company, part of the decentralized education ecosystem, that what they do is they provide these director of studies and possibly even subject-specific mentors that you could really talk to. I think one of the problems that I've had in my life, and I think a lot of people have, is lack of guidance. The internet is really, really great if you know what you're looking for. But there's a lot of times when we don't get the appropriate advice, either because our parents don't know it, or our peers don't know it, or our teachers don't know it, or we just are not in that contact. So essentially, this would be a very, very liquid way to get the answer of anything you want from a subject-specific mentor, as well as have a personal director of studies to manage your studies. I also thought of one more thing that I forgot to put in here. Just thought of it right now. So when I was thinking about how the whole course system would work, it's very likely that it could be separated into the content providers and the service providers. So if you want to take a course so I've run a revision course company for some time, so I know how that works. And there's a difference, there's a divide between who teaches, the teacher, and everything else about the course. So that means communicating with the students, handling payment, even such a thing as setting up the website, communication with them, handling the payment, booking accommodation or providing accommodation when they come to the airport or the bus station, providing transport to the accommodation, possibly even providing fun and activities during evenings or weekends, or even food, and if that's desired, providing security and providing transport to and from the location of teaching, and then providing transport back to the bus station or airport, and waving goodbye. So in order for the whole system to be more competitive and more liquid, we could separate into two: the teachers, who could literally be individuals, or it could be schools, whatever is possible, and then those service providers that would handle everything else. So say you want to take a course in Paris, France. So there's a teacher that looks really, really good, and you can pick any of the service providers, for example, independently, to handle everything apart from the actual teaching. So this will lead to the real decentralization. If we package it all into one, then it's very, very hard to start an intensive course company, because there's so much things to worry about. But if we separate the two, then anyone can do it, and the other services are provided by someone else. Anyone can teach. What did I want to? Yeah, I think that's. I wanted to say one more thing, but I forgot it, so it doesn't matter. And now let's finally have a look at the products. So we already discussed Solvio Learn and Advance. It's very likely that this would be one app, mobile or web. I wanted to give you guys a UX design, but I wasn't able to draw it up in time. But let me just tell you how I'm kind of preliminarily thinking of how it would look. So if you think about how an app on Android or iOS looks, then a lot of apps such as Spotify or Airbnb, they have this bottom row with the different sections. So then how this could look is, for example, the first section could say home, which would be the social network part, where you would see what everybody else achieved and you could kind of motivate them even more. Second one would be kind of your path. So that would be a plan for everything that you're expected to learn in the next few days and weeks, and also kind of the calendar aspect of it, which courses you're going to. The third section could be search, which would essentially be the Solvio Learn, allow you to semantically search through all the different learning paths for educating yourself about something. And then the fourth one will be profile, or the fourth one will be discover, where you could actually, for example, rate other people's works and get rewarded for it. And the final one will be the profile, which would be the Solvio profile service, which would allow you to, this RPG thing aspect of education, that you will actually be sort of in gamification of education, that you will be leveling up as you learn stuff and be able to showcase that to future employers. Oh, and I've actually have that right here as well. So already discussed that. Cool. And finally, we talked about Pruvio, which is very likely to be provided as a separate app. I'm thinking right now of a chatbot interface, but that could very well change. Finally, I'd like to leave you with two thoughts. Bitcoin created decentralized and open currency. Solvio will create a decentralized and open education system. In summary, Solvio is Bitcoin of education. And the last thought that I want to leave you with is a quote by Mark Twain, American author, that I never let schooling get in the way of my education. So recast it in the terminology that I use. His quote would say, I never let education get in the way of my learning. And after over 100 years of him saying that, we'll resolve this conflict by unifying learning with education. And that's the end of the presentation.
That was a clap, a great one.
So I'm gonna take a 5-minute break. Feel free to do whatever you want or discuss, and I'll be back in 5 minutes. Oops. How do I? So I'm back. Do you guys have any questions or comments?
Yeah. Well,
Hey, Adam.
hey, Dominic. It seems to me that you have presented a very broad and very ambitious vision of future of education, but I haven't heard a compelling MVP.
Yes.
Do you have any idea on that?
That's a really, really good question. It's something that I talked about with my friend Alex yesterday, who's also on the call. So there's two possibilities. One is that we try to develop an MVP as fast as possible, and then go to institutions such as universities or governments and try to land a deal, essentially. And the second option is that we do that before building the MVP. And there are advantages and disadvantages for each of them. The advantage of going the first route would be that we would see how well we work together. We would see, if this can actually be done, some testing or iteration, and we would also, be able to provide something already.
Okay, and
The advantage of going the second route is that it might seem less salesy if we don't have any. It might actually seem less salesy if we don't have anything yet, and we go to them and we try to land the partnership even before that, and essentially bring them in as full partners and build out the system together. So a high-profile institution such as the University of Oxford would be really, really beneficial for this project. What did I want to say? Oh yeah. So based on I kind of mentioned this theory called disruption theory. And one of the things that disruption theory predicts or suggests to managers of existing corporations is that they should actually invest, or in the case of University of Oxford, support the companies that will in the future be disrupting them. So actually, disruption theory sort of predicates or gives a recipe that they should do it in order to preserve their own name and standing in the future world. Of course, the problem is that not everybody who's a manager of a corporation or an institution knows disruption theory, which is why it's not always followed. And that's why a lot of corporations that used to be very, very popular go bust. That's why we have this creative destruction in the economy, because new technologies essentially disrupt the old ones. There's a super good book. I'm going to stop talking. There's a super good book called The Innovator's Dilemma by Clay Christensen, who's a professor at Harvard Business School, which outlines this and gives examples in the hard disk drive industry, in the in other industries that really super well illustrates this argument. And I just realized I made a mistake. So disruption theory is by Clay Christensen. Aggregation theory is the one that I mentioned in the presentation, and that is by Ben Thompson, as far as I know. Anyways.
Yeah, sorry, my internet died for a bit there, so I might have missed a bit of your answer. But okay. What is the MVP?
So essentially, there's two paths: either to build an MVP first.
What is it?
Oh, so the alternative is to first go to the institutions and build an MVP together.
Okay.
The MVP, in my opinion, would be so if you're asking about the very first step that should be built, the very first product, in my opinion, it would be the Solvio Learn service. essentially an aggregator of learning resources, a generalization for these roadmaps and awesome lists on GitHub, and all these Quora and Stack Exchange questions like, how do I learn this? What should I learn? What are the prerequisites? That's a really, really Web 0.0, a pre-web way of categorizing information. But if we're able to categorize it in a Web 2 or 3.0 way, that's going to be really, really powerful. And also, one more answer. I have already started building stuff. So when it comes to Pruvio, I have not an MVP yet, but I have code. I can prove some AMGM problems on the arithmetic geometric mean inequality using my JavaScript library. And additionally, I've also started thinking about how the actual Solvio advance would look. And let me show you that right now. So where do I have it? Right here. So I used to call it Lernasa. This name has changed because I realized that this is actually the most important project, the most important app and product, the entry point. So it should actually be called Solvio, particular Solvio Advance, this particular stuff. And I've started building out sort of the specifications for something like this to happen. It's right now fully public on GitHub. And I was just trying to explore if it's possible to do this in a fully decentralized way. So what do I mean by decentralized? I mean that we don't actually, enter all of the different categories, topics like economics and biology and philosophy, and then all the subtopics, and then all that. That is not entered manually. It's not a centralized learning framework. But actually, those topics arise by individuals that enter a certain topic as a prerequisite, or what I call here a dependency. So let me show you that right here. So every time you submit a review for a certain learning resource, you say which topic it is. You say it's how much time you spent on it, and how much time it's possible to spend on it, and then you list the dependencies. Now, what's a dependency? A dependency is essentially a topic with a factor of how strong it is. If it's a soft dependency or a hard dependency. So that's really, really important. And essentially, there's this concept that you can either create a knowledge tree, which is essentially what we're going to be doing here, in one of two ways. Either by creating it in what the individual topics talk about, like quantum physics talks about, I don't know what quantum physics talks about. It talks about the atomic properties of atoms. And that's part of physics, because physics talks about the properties of the real world. So that would be kind of a centralized way of determining these topics and their hierarchies. But there's another way to create this knowledge tree, which is by the dependencies of the individual topics. And that's kind of the way I'm proposing. And the reason I wrote this document was to see if something like that would be possible. And my current conclusion is that it is. But to fully answer your question, the very first thing that I would do to build Solvio Learn would actually be in a centralized way. I say that at the end. So initialization. So the Solvio contributors would create the first hierarchies of topics, and this can be done manually using Wikipedia. Wikipedia is very good at providing hierarchies to topics. For example, here's the first two paragraphs of a certain article, and it exactly tells you computational mathematics may refer to two different things. Either it's using mathematics for allowing and improving computer computation and applied mathematics, or it's the use of computers for mathematics itself. This includes the use of computers for mathematical computation, which is called computer algebra, the study of what can and cannot be computerized in mathematics, which is another field called effective methods, and which computations may be done with present technology, which is another field called complexity theory. And finally, which proofs can and which proofs can't be done on computers, which is another field called proof assistance, the study of proof assistance. So these two paragraphs give you exactly the hierarchy of what computational mathematics entails. And this will essentially provide the initial topic hydration for the users, which can later on be changed. And then we could also go through the roadmaps and the awesome lists that I mentioned on GitHub and essentially aggregate all of that, assuming the license is correct, into our app. So we would actually start off by aggregating all of that information from the internet in a centralized way. That by itself would provide incredible value to the user, that they could go to one app and not have to go to Google, which is not built for semantic search. And then once we get the users, then they could be contributing those reviews to increase their own proficiencies in their learning profile. And by submitting the reviews, we would find out dependencies and build the knowledge tree from scratch in this second manner, knowledge tree built by the dependencies rather than a centralized way. So yeah, does that answer the question? Sorry about the long response.
Well, I think you would be competing with specialized learning platforms, centralized learning platforms that.
I totally agree with you. This, in my opinion, just provides validation for why this is so necessary. So I also read Coursera blog, and I read all these blogs. And like Coursera, about 2 years ago, they introduced just this, that if you want to learn something, they actually have this learning path. Udacity has it as well. And it's extreme validation that this is so important and so wanted and so necessary.
Yeah, what I think is that these platforms, these centralized platforms, because they are both creating the content and categorizing it and creating these learning paths and so on, they are able to provide very good UX and like make sure that everything fits neatly together, right? That there's no redundancy and that it's like a smooth experience for the learner, right?
Absolutely.
I think a decentralized platform could have problems competing with that sort of, I guess, good UX.
So essentially, the one of the gists of this Solvio Learn business proposition is that, you know, a self-learner like me, I'm creating this product for myself. If I want to learn something, I am dumbfounded as to which website to go to. Should I go to udemy.com? Should I go to google.com? Should I go to coursera.com? Or should I go to amazon.com? And that's just one of, or iTunes podcasts. That's just 5 of so many of the possibilities, or YouTube, where I could find the best resource for my skill level and for how much I want to spend on it. Like, let's say I want to learn computational mathematics in 1 hour. Is there a YouTube course on it, or is there a Udemy course on it for 1 hour? Right? I think if I want to spend 20 hours on it, and I know this, and also like we allow it to be parameterized by your own learning profile. So depending on what I already know about mathematics and computer science, that will radically change the best learning resource for me.
I'll just jump in. Firstly, really great presentation, Dominic. I wrote down a couple of questions. I'll just quickly go through them. The first one was like, what was the age range of this?
Perfect question. Another thing that
confused it. When you started, I felt like, okay, he's targeting like younger kids. You mentioned 16-year-olds traveling and stuff, but then you were getting into quite high-level stuff, and I was thinking this must be for adults then. Perfect question.
So, you know, the answer in a generic sense is there is no age limit. It's from 0 to 120. But on a more practical level, what are the audiences that we'll want to target at first? So I really think that a bachelor's degree age group makes the most sense for this product, followed possibly by a 2-year, the last 2 or 4 years of high school education. And the reasons are numerous. Like, for example, if travel is involved, it's hard to guarantee the security and responsibility of students much younger than that. To answer the question, I think from the ages of 16 or 17 to the ages of 24 is where we would add the most value. Once governments recognize this as an alternative to formal education, and allow this education system to be used to apply for master's or PhD degrees, then that would be super duper cool. Because I had a call yesterday with Alex, and what he was saying was very interesting, that universities are very, very good at doing research, and they should remain doing that. So if you want to do a PhD or you want to be an academic, universities are for a long time going to be the best choice for that. So that's not the idea, to compete on a basis of research with them at first. Right now, it's learning and education and teaching in particular.
Perfect. And then my other two questions, basically following up from what Adam was talking about, like the competition out there is pretty intense for something like this. And even like decentralized competition with like Bit Degree and stuff, I think there's quite a lot out there already. And then when we're talking about like MVP and stuff, like there needs to be a ton of user research done. Like the users or the potential users will tell you what your MVP should be.
I agree.
Like just your personal experience is great because you're starting the project, but when it comes to what you should be building first, you need user research, and they're going to tell you. Like, and a lot of like the pain points you've had personally with like you don't know where to go for information and stuff, you don't know if that's other people's pain points, right? Unless you've done that user research.
I totally agree. Totally agree with that.
I've been like the company I'm at now, like we did basically zero user research. It was someone's personal opinion. He thought people need the product he wanted to create.
Right.
And then, do they need it? Well, currently they don't. So yeah, user research is super important. We need to get to universities, schools, and talk to parents about like what they would find easier to help their child learn from a young age, or if going all the way up to like university. Yeah,
I totally agree with that point. And then there's also two more things that you brought to my mind. When you were saying that there's a lot of platforms like this. So recently I actually discovered this website, which I haven't tried yet. It's called learnanything.xyz, I believe. Which is trying to do the same thing as Solvio Learn. So this is something that we might want to try and have a look at. What is how much does it differ from our model? And also, I just want to say one more thing to the previous question. There's also dependencies between providing high school education and a university one. The reason I want to start with a university one, a bachelor's equivalent, is that, for example, one specific case, I find that a lot of people who are very, very smart in Europe, they want to apply to Oxford or Cambridge, but they go to a school that doesn't have the appropriate expertise for that, and they don't know that the deadline is 15th of October. And they decide they want to apply there sometime in January, and by that it's too late. So that's one audience that we could address is high performing in terms of academia individuals that missed out on that chance. And there are not that many universities in Europe that those people might want to go to, and we could sell this essentially as the best way for a smart and motivated 18-year-old to pursue his education. And then if we do that, if we have a bachelor's thing, then once we set up a high school thing, it's going to be so much easier, because now we can showcase that these, we can showcase the success, obviously, but also we can say that, if you take this this high school education equivalent, then that will lead to more naturally to the university equivalent, which we already know is better because we've already tested it and proved it. And then once we do that, then the earlier 2 years will become easier, and on and on. And essentially, I think that this can compete with a lot of education up to a very early age, because you don't have to travel. Then you can use other advantages of this model that I haven't even thought about, because I mainly concentrate on the age group that I mentioned. That still provides a better service.
Yeah, I think you've, like, just throughout the presentation and even like what you were just saying then, you talked about so many different things.
Yeah, sorry that my answers are so long.
No, but to bring all that, what you've said, to life is a mammoth task, and you would need a massive team to really bring all that to life. That's why I think you really need to nail down what the MVP is going to be, and the MVP needs to be a success, right, for it to grow.
Right.
So you need to
definitely agree. So that's one of the reasons why I want to do this in an as much decentralized way as possible, so that we actually maximize the chances of this happening and of there not being a failure, right? So the disadvantage of something like a school is if something fucks up, then it casts a bad light on the entire thing. But if one of our service providers fucks up, then they can be eliminated from the platform, obviously, and other service providers can step in. So I believe that decentralized networks provide more robustness than centralized ones.
Okay, so I also have some question. Sorry.
Yeah, go on, Tunda.
Okay, so do you know enough people with different background and expertise? For example, I know that you mentioned that you want the app to be more gamified.
Yes.
So do you know someone with a good someone who is a good graphical designer, for example? Is it important?
I know one very good graphical designer, and he's on the call.
And also, for example, it's also very, very important to for the marketing or like.
I agree. I totally agree. So this is one thing that I didn't even mention, like the outreach. It would be really, really great if this project can go without inorganic marketing, completely organically. That's how Gnosis was built, for example, into such a successful company. All they did was organic marketing.
Yeah, totally
one of the ways to achieve that is to have a very, very open company. So that's one of the reasons. Oh, and I forgot to mention this as well, is just one last thing. Where this project would start is discourse.com. So Discourse is essentially a Web 2.0 forum that allows you to have civilized discussions for your fans, employees, team members, etc. So this would mean that all of our discussions that we will carry on, by the way, this video will also be public, will be fully open and permissionless for anyone to join and advise us and see our progress. Most of the coding will be on GitHub, where we have an organization called Solvio Foundation. I just added the first repository. So even things like project management, instead of Trello, which can be siloed and hard to access for the public, we can use something like GitHub Projects, where you click on it and anyone in the world can see exactly our pipeline.
Nice.
And also with the planning of the learning tree and stuff, I would say, for example, we need someone who specializes in machine learning.
We have somebody on that doing that on the call as well, luckily.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, because we can like gather data from the users.
Yeah.
And then we can somehow refine our course suggestions or learning tree, for example. I would say
definitely agree. This whole recommendation thing. So my friend Alex is looking into machine learning, and one of the things that I told him yesterday, is that it's really, really good that if you have somebody from machine learning, because I have no experience with that field whatsoever. I come from the blockchain world, so I can provide this decentralized perspective. But it would be really good if we have somebody on the team who can provide this other aspect of computer science, machine learning perspective, and see where that can fit in and how that can improve the service. And that would be really, really cool. And I do agree that there's possibilities for incorporating that to achieve a better user experience.
Can I just jump in for a sec?
Of course.
Yeah, so I actually did my master's thesis on recommender engines, evaluating different machine learning algorithms.
Who's speaking? Sorry, I can't recognize your voice.
My name is, this is Jeff.
Oh, hey, Jeff. How's it going?
Going well.
Yeah.
Going well. Yeah, so machine learning is kind of my expertise, I guess you could say, as well.
Terrific.
That's what I do for my job and whatnot. So doing a recommender engine, I mean, yeah, you're only as good as your data, so you'd want to have some infrastructure in place that would allow you to collect useful data in the first place.
Definitely.
Yeah, but I also had a second.
One of the conflicts and disadvantages that I possibly see, sorry to interrupt, in machine learning is that it does require, at least in the current state, a centralized database. But there do exist apps that are trying to, or companies, products that are trying to combine public databases such as blockchain or IPFS with machine learning.
But I think just to stop you, like, I think when we're talking about centralized and decentralized, like, you need to take the best bits from decentralization and the best bits from
I totally agree.
Like, you can't be trying to pigeonhole yourself into a decentralized solution.
I totally agree.
Quite often, the person that suffers is the user.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I'm trying to find the sweet spot. So one of the ways of doing that potentially would be, not to store everything on the blockchain because it's very expensive. But what you could do is you could store it on a system like IPFS and essentially only store the hash. So you would store all your works, all your essays, all your data there. That means you would have access to it forever. And using proxy or encryption, we could even enable that an arbitrary amount of viewers can see it. But at the same time, it would be public in the sense that if another app does better than the Solvio app, then you could give them access to the data, and they could, this is the case when I said that the foundation would do very poorly, another player could step in. So totally agree that there needs to be a compromise between centralized and decentralization.
And then one more thing just before I leave, because I've got to shoot. But when it comes down to marketing, if you make a great MVP and it's a great product, like, you don't need marketing. Like, that's just...
I think so. That's really encouraging.
Yeah, but look, like Tesla haven't spent a penny on like paid advertising, and they're doing all right.
I still doubt it a little bit, like without marketing, because I have the feeling on this market for online education, we already have a lot of big established names, for example, Udacity or Khan Academy. And for new apps to compete, I would say without marketing, it's very, very difficult.
Well, you need to be unique. You need to add unique features into it that the others don't have, I guess. But yeah, no, I'm not saying discount marketing by any chance, but yeah.
I agree with both of what you guys have said. So one thing, we're not competing with something like Udacity or Khan Academy because we're not a content provider at all. We're an aggregator, right? So actually, we allow you to search the best courses in Udacity or Khan Academy and find them personalized to your personal needs. And additionally, what was I going to say? The additional, I forgot that. So continue.
Dominic, yeah. Did you answer the question? Because I would just like to add something to the part of it's not a course provider or mainly. I mean, you mentioned the fact that it might be a recommendation engine, but what I see as an MVP potentially is the decentralized testing of knowledge that people show their learning path from course platforms such as Udemy, Coursera. There's no reason to compete with them. But we're basically building a layer on top of it where people show their learning path and then they get tested by an expert in that respective field. And if you have enough experts in the field that test these people, if they actually learned the skills they explain that they learned, then you might get a low probability that they are cheating. So you would have a decentralized testing system, and you would have a very granular credential system by having people not tested by centralized institutions, but by decentralized networks of experts in the fields who might also be self-learners. And that's what I see as the MVP of the platform. So there's a lot of discussion on how it would compete with Coursera and Udemy, but I mean, that's not the point. Platform is not a content provider. It's like a layer on top where you show your learning path and you can get tested and you can learn by connecting with people in a decentralized manner.
Totally. That's really interesting. I like the idea of getting verified by like experts, because you can do that from anywhere.
I agree.
I also agree with Alex that that's a great way how to look at it. Jacob speaking. Hello, everybody. Also, very nice presentation. I think this is a very nice product, or a very nice idea. Also, pardon my voice. I have a little bit of cold, so I have to really try hard. I would like to provide some questions and maybe even some answers that would lead us a little bit closer to what this really is. From my point of view, what you presented is not just one project, obviously, but it's like a big idea that stems down into multiple different branches. And this is where things might get mixed up, yeah, because not everybody is aware of the dependencies and of the, let's say, interconnections between those topics. So if we're asking for the MVP, which is like the obvious first question, where do we go first? What is the first stuff we want to show that's going to get people excited so that we can do organic growth and all the other stuff? From what I've seen and from what I've understood, I think that the core of the MVP really is a database and the system that provides the learning paths and then provides, let's say, the assurance of quality of the output of your education.
Right.
Yeah. With that said, I think that the biggest focus or the best idea how to really get about the human-centric design, we need to know what sort of questions we're asking. So, okay, we are building a database. We want it to contain the learning paths, and we want these learning paths that are in this database to help people realize where they want to go, how they can get there, and if they think they are there, how to verify that they've been on the right path. With that said, I think that one of the first things, there should be at least one example of the learning path on which we could model, where are we going, what would be the step, how those dependencies look like, etc. So this would be one very visual thing that anybody could see, and anybody could say, yeah, this would really help me. When I was at university, I had no idea what point was there for anthropological philosophy. But if you told me what it opens for me, then that would be much better. So I think that this is the real value of the system, that it tells you why, it tells you how, and it tells you if you've done it. Yeah.
Yes.
First part for the MVP, it's a database. It tells you how to study, what to study, and if you studied good. And then would really spark my interest, because I really believe that the educational system needs some sort of evolution, and that's something that supersedes or is above the government, something that is like global. It's a very good idea, at least from my point of view. So once you said about this being alternative, or let's say a crutch, a support for the traditional system we see that the government implements, for example, in Czech Republic, let's make a case study. I think this could be very very publishable for the media. It could be something that could really attract attention by saying, yeah, okay, we figured out this one learning path. This is how it would look like. And right now we've begun thinking of how this could be applied into some state that is like really negotiable to doing this, which could be, for example, Estonia, because they are like really into the digitalization of the public sphere. So per my point of view, the MVP should be a database. We should focus on having at least one learning path that we want to branch out, that we want to try to build, and then talk to the government and try to find out how we could basically screw this on it. Screw this on. I'm not sure if this is the right way to say it, yeah. But how we could basically implement and make this integrated part. And I think this would be the first step that we do, and this would be a very good core for the MVP. And then you can start with human-centric design, You can sign with Lean Canvas and all these other great things that help you make it sharper. But at first, we should have a very clear definition of how many projects and products really are there, because I think there are multiple. We're talking about multiple ideas. Yeah. And then each of them would have their own MVP. For me, the most fascinating thing is the idea of having centralized wisdom of the humankind. For me, that's like amazing idea. That's something I really could stand up for. And if that would be the case, I would love to help. And I think that looking into the schooling systems in countries, trying to find out their weak points, especially with the people not knowing where they are going, if you study IT and if you start right now, you have no idea what the field is going to look like in 5 years. We didn't have mobile applications 10 years ago, and we didn't have blockchains 5 years ago. And it takes lots of time, for the schools to process that, for the new guidelines to be done. So I think this is a great start. This is, I think, something that's really exciting. And if that's something you would like to build, just count me in. This sounds really great. But at first, I would like to separate all the stuff, make some sort of a visual map of what all the projects are there, what the connections are, and then we can talk about the MVP, which would be the centralizing point, which would help us greatly to really find out what we need to do and when. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you really much. That was really interesting.
This is Jeff. I just had a quick question or consideration to throw in there, and that would be how exactly you would approach handling subjects that normally are paired with a lab component and requirement, because I don't think that, for example, someone who wants to learn chemistry should be given their degree if they haven't gone through a lab component using like mass spectrometer, Raman spectrometer, etc. So how exactly that would be dealt with is a consideration.
Definitely. So my best answer, to be honest, is the short-term courses. So there's a lot of stuff that you can learn by watching lectures, but then there's a lot of stuff that you can't. So I actually expect that, let's divide it into 3 possible fields: humanities, kind of theoretical sciences, and practical sciences. So in humanities, what I expect might happen is you would watch the lectures first, and then you would join a course to discuss them, like this idea of debate. For example, in small groups of 4 to 5 people, you get much more interaction there. In the practical sciences, it might be the same, because the end result is some lab, as you say, or an experiment. So that might be the short-term real-life course aspect of it. But when it comes to theoretical sciences like math or physics, coming from a math teacher, I find that students need human interaction usually at first. So there it could be potentially in the reverse order. The teaching and the small group, 4 to 5 people teaching and practice would come at first, and then once the students grasp the basics, which are the most important, then they could solve the problems individually. And also, while you guys were talking, I came up with, does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yes.
Perfect. While you guys were talking, I also thought of two more new things. So when you guys were talking about Khan Academy, that's actually one of the selling points of the system. Is I love Khan Academy. I learned so much stuff there, like math. These days I'm learning electrical engineering on Academy, completely random topic. So one of the selling points of this is that, if Khan Academy is so good and so many people love it, which it is, and they do, then you can actually use it for all of your education, or as much of it as you want, right? So Solvio uses Khan Academy because it's great and people love it. And the other thing, we also talked about organic marketing. And I feel like this is something that could very easily go viral, is my intuition. So whether it's on a platform like Hacker News or something like that, I really believe that this is something that has potential for organic growth.
I'm just going to jump to the head of the queue
Yeah.
before I leave. But I really liked what Jacob was saying about learning paths and stuff. And it's something you can't really learn a learning path, right?
Right.
Like no one knows like what Elon Musk's learning path was. Like how did he get to know the information he did to build in, you know, multiple successful companies and stuff, or Bill Gates or anybody who's made a success. And I feel that's a really interesting thing to look at. Like what were other people's learning paths and what can they teach people who are just starting on their own path of learning, right?
Definitely. Totally agree. And also you mentioned one thing that Jacob mentioned, which I forgot to answer. So I totally agree with what Jacob said. And for example, at first what we could do, the first MVP is, as I said, assuming the license is correct, copy something like this into our database.
Yeah.
So this is right. This is a full roadmap for how to become a developer, and this just is asking for you know, a semantic categorization. And then so that's the first part is a centralized learning path system, and then also allow people to review the works, which we get more data than is currently on the internet, and possibly also integrate with the APIs of these content providers like Udemy. And then the next step is the grading, the credentialing. I don't know, like the way I thought about it until now was that the more catchy or the more useful product will be actually the search. But you know, if you guys think that the more the low-hanging fruit for getting consumer attention is actually the credentialing, then of course it's totally possible to reverse the order in which we build them.
Very cool. But yeah, it was nice to meet you guys, and let's do this again sometime.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. Definitely.
Yeah, just real quick before anybody leaves, Dominic, could you make a document where we have a visualization of all the sub products you suggested for Solvio, so that we have like an overview and we can collaborate on? Then it's like easier to understand. Then we have a granular view. What are the small products of this huge vision? And then we could also contribute to this.
Perfect. Sounds great. So I have a whatchamacallit, a GitHub account. So if you guys send me your GitHub handle, then I can give you an invite, and we can collaborate there.
Yeah, maybe also like start a document where we have like a visual representation.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah,
I'll post a document. I think so. One of the key tenets is that everything is public as much as possible. So rather than using Google Docs, I think it's a really good idea to use Markdown together with GitHub. There's one more thing that I had the idea for that I forgot. Can somebody ask a question and then maybe I'll remember?
Okay, so my question is, have you thought about funding via Kickstarter or some crowdfunded thing?
Not really. I mean, so there's.
I don't know whether it's like a viable choice, but yeah.
So the way, I mean, Kickstarter, the way it works is you give them money, you pledge them money, and I'm not sure if it's deducted from your account straight away. You guys need to correct me on that. But either it's deducted straight away, and then once they build a product, you receive it, or it's deducted only once they build a product and you receive it. But in any case, Kickstarter is like you buy a product before it's built, and it's most of the time used for physical products. That's just its main application. There are some software projects on Kickstarter, but essentially it's always something for something.
But we'll definitely find also a crowdfunding platform that would be available for this. Kickstarter is just one example, but definitely there are some crowdfunding platforms.
I mean, so for me, crowdfunding in the 21st century is synonymous with token sale. I think that's the most effective, not without any intermediaries. We have crowdfunding, and I don't like this concept of actually providing something where we capture value.
right? You know what I mean? Like, because that assumes that we have some margin. But I really like the idea of having a commission-free tutoring slash teaching system. So we actually capture no value from the transaction between the individual people. That brings me to the payment system. If you guys want to hear about that. So one of my ideas is that we're completely payment agnostic. So an established company like Awesome Math, that's the company that I was a student and teaching assistant and teacher at, they might want to submit their courses on our platform, and they handle all the payment. So when you click enroll, it takes it to their site, to their website, or to their email address, and they handle everything. So we just serve as the aggregator. Alternatively, if I just want to be a tutor, then I don't want to set up my own payment system, obviously. So then it could be done through cryptocurrency. I believe that's the fastest way to make financial transactions in the 21st century. So I could essentially become a tutor, and I'm paid, $50 an hour for tutoring, and somebody pays me, and then I withdraw it in Ether through a smart contract. And then we could also think about setting up a service provider, basically, that would do the same thing, but it would also take in fiat money. So I could also be paid in fiat, or the customer, the parent, or the student could also pay in fiat. Oh, and I think I'm starting to remember what I was going to mention. Somebody said that it would be really cool if we have like a success case that we could really like publish. And I think that's a really good idea. In fact, I already have one. So I used to run this company called oxsc.eu, and I asked every single student to write me a review, because I knew that it would be this intuition that it would be useful for me some later time in life. And essentially I amassed a pretty large collection of reviews that essentially they explain that the course was super duper helpful. And some of them even say that they went from zero to hero, so that they learned much more. And essentially this is partially because I'm the teacher. That could be an explanation. I don't discount that, but I think that there's a much more important fundamental thing going on here, which is that intensive courses are really, really efficient. So most of my math I learned at Awesome Math. I learned more in 3 weeks than I did in 5 years. And so many people have the same experience. So basically this fact that I only got one 4-star review, and then there was one troll who gave me a 1-star review saying an amazing database of questions, lots of work, very productive hours during summer, and a huge amount to cover in mere 2 weeks. Apart from these 2 reviews, they were all 5 stars. So I think I proved, at least to myself, that intensive courses work. Essentially, in 2 weeks, we covered the whole year of mathematics. Anyone have anything else to say? I'm ready for a few more questions or comments, or we end it here.
Well, I might have one more question. That would be just to a little bit clarify the outcome of this meeting. Under which conditions you would basically consider this meeting a success? What is the desired output for you from this meeting?
I think it's a combination of I mean, that's a mean question, because it's a combination of increasing your likelihood of agreeing with me. That's the point of any discourse, and I think I've done that, hopefully, but also producing a very good explanation that can then go on YouTube and then can be used in other resources. For example, I already applied for the first sponsorship. I asked discourse.org to give us free hosting. And one of the reasons why I'm making the call, one of the million reasons, is I want to send them the 10-minute summary of the project, because I think it's a much better way for them to understand what we're about than some article or an email. That's one of the many motivations. But I mean, I would love to work on it more, but I don't know how much time will permit until March. From March, I will have part-time, so then it's going to be much better, and then we can start building the MVP, getting people excited about the idea. One of the ways we could crowdfund this is using swag. So essentially, it's very, very cheap to create branded clothes, both in Europe and in the US. It costs about a few dollars for a t-shirt, and something like $10 for a high quality 100% cotton sweater. And we can sell it for $25, which is kind of the going rate for swag, which would allow people that are excited about the project to not only show their support of it publicly, but also to help fund it, which would be really, really cool.
Okay, I will have to go. But from my perspective, the number one thing is like pinpointing what the MVP is and making sure it's compelling enough to attract users.
I agree.
Yeah.
Essentially, just to summarize the 3-stage model: consumers are first, teachers, content providers are second, governments are third. So we start off by building out stuff that just attracts attention. The search engine to create a customized learning path, way to get credentials for blah blah blah, all the stuff that's already been said, and also Pruvio. So those three are consumer apps.
Yeah, one more note on the topic of Pruvio.
Go for it.
I still don't have a good grasp of what it is, because I don't know how like testing through proofs works and looks
okay. So
in practice.
That's a very good question. So the way math works, it's essentially, I think of math as an engineering system, except you don't have the laws of physics as your assumptions.
If I just can interrupt real quick, I think the best way, we can discuss it on a high level, but I think the most illustrative way would be prepare.
Can I show you the code?
Prepare an example of a test on some topic in the traditional system, right? And then next to it, a test through proofs, right? And just like for people to be able to contrast. Just preparing one concrete example, I think would really like illustrate the idea best.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like to explain it, a high level example might, like a high level explanation might actually be better. Let me just try it in like 30 seconds again. So the way math works is you have axioms, and the only, like, math is essentially a knowledge system. It's an implication system. It's if we assume something, what else is true? That's what math asks. So this is some specification. So math is all about implications. And what I want to build is computer algebra for a computer to understand implications. Now, what does it mean to understand implication? It means that it fits one of the axiom schemas. And so we have to build out the axioms for the most popular theories, such as logic or group theory or set theory or number theory. And then we also have to prove the engine that allows you to check whether a statement is deducible from the appropriate theorems or generated itself. So maybe let me try a different way. So what this will mean in practice, you have a linear equation such as 2x plus 3z to 3y is equal to 5, and x plus y is equal to 7, and the app says solve this. So Khan Academy right now, what it does is it asks what is x and what is y. So you have to look at this problem, you have to do all the work yourself, and then you just check the answer. That's what I call a short answer question. What Pruvio will allow is you would be able to say, okay, if this is true, then that means x is equal to 7 minus y. And it will be able to say, yes, it is, because it knows that one of the properties of addition is that you can add both the same number to both sides, and the implication is true. So it has this engine that allows it to know if something is true, then what else is true. And
so is it basically about
something is true, what else is true? So
is it about validating the work?
X is equal to if you say this implies that x is equal to 8 minus y, it will say I couldn't find a path that would lead me to that result. Please tell me how you did that, and then you wouldn't be able to do that because it's not correct.
Okay, so is it basically about validating all of the steps?
Exactly, you're precisely right.
Okay.
And then, so the applications are mainly two. The first one is this kind of step-by-step learning and teaching of math, as I'm showing here. And the second application is for, so this is for numerical questions. The second application is for actual proof-based questions. So there could be a question that says, I have it in my index. There could be a question that says that, assume x and y are real numbers. Now prove that x squared plus y squared is a real number. So this is a proof search question. You're searching for proof. And for those questions, Khan Academy is helpless. It can't do anything because it doesn't understand mathematics. It only understands manually entered questions and answers.
Yeah, but I think this sort of abstract math, right, is something that is really relevant only for people that are really studying like math.
No, but that's what I'm trying to say is that it has two applications. I totally agree for math Olympiads or for people studying math, but also for numerical questions, such as easy questions such as this.
Yeah.
Because it allows us to check it step by step. You know what I mean?
Okay, so that's what like a good teacher does, right?
Exactly.
Right now.
Exactly. So this is what a good teacher does. This is right now done in incredibly manual effort. So we'll be able to provide very good math education at the tip of your fingertips to anyone with a phone or a computer.
Yeah. But the downside is that the people that are being tested have to be much more verbose, right, when answering.
Yes, I totally. Well, do they?
Yeah, they have to illustrate the whole process, right?
You're right.
Yeah, which I think is good for like if somebody is learning and wants to find out where he went wrong, right, in his process, then it's good. But in other cases, it's maybe like it's maybe more. It's enough to just provide the answer and do the calculation in head maybe. But,
I agree with you. A part of me still thinks that that the reason that these short answer questions are really prevalent, for example, in the SATs, in the American Maths Competition, the AMC, and in, for example, the Státní maturita in the Czech Republic, is that they don't have the manpower to check these questions.
Yeah.
But if they had the manpower, like this is, any math teacher would tell you, a better way of teaching mathematics step by step rather than just checking the answer. So this will revolutionize in that we will be able to provide yeah, as I said, this a much more effective way for not a fraction but zero compared to millions of dollars.
The way I see it, it's more of a solution assistant than really something to validate the answers. At least,
yes, I agree.
Okay. Okay.
Can I just jump in here? Because I just did a university course in mathematics, and what you're proposing here, the fact that you can check your steps step by step, is already being done. I think Khan Academy started implementing it. You can find it on Wolfram Alpha. And when you're learning mathematics on the internet, almost all of the resources right now are done like this. So
okay, wait.
You can check how they do it, I guess. So
okay, so one sec. So Wolfram Alpha is developed by this guy called Stephen Wolfram, who, by the way, yeah, he studied at Oxford. So that is truly the most advanced mathematical engine in the world. It's run by a mathematical engine called Mathematica. I do agree that those guys probably have it. They're very, very advanced. Khan Academy, I would yet remain to be convinced that they implemented computer algebra.
right, it's possible that the system is not automatic, say, but the questions I did had them put in, and you want to propose a automatic system of showing step-by-step equations or calculations.
Yes,
because it's possible that I did only a few questions there, so it's possible that the steps were put in manually. So yeah.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And if you could send me the link to that question, then I'll check it out. I doubt that they have it. The closest that I've seen, so I pitched this whole idea of Pruvio to one of my friends and colleagues at Gnosis, and what he showed me is that there's a very famous math educator in the US, who I forgot the name of, who recently, he created an online textbook for logic, which has this. So by the way, the textbook, it's a very, very badly created website. It's not even mobile responsive, and it's just such a pity, but it totally validates the idea that it's possible and that it's wanted. What he did is only for logic. He did essentially an interactive textbook for logic, and logic is the easiest of any mathematical theory because you need logic to build any other mathematical theory on top of it. So the idea of this is that we expanded. See, logic is one of my files here, and it doesn't import any other files. Oh, actually, right now it's empty. And what I'm trying to say is it's the foundation, but if we want anything slightly more complex, such as set theory or even algebra, we need to build that. Essentially, how I built this app, which currently, it does allow you to prove stuff. It allows you to prove that x squared plus y squared is real. The way I did it is I just opened up a lecture notes from Oxford, like Introduction to University Mathematics, which essentially is a very good summary of the foundations of math. And I went through every single statement and I put it into code. And if you do that, you're able to build the entire foundations of mathematics, which eventually leads to logic, set theory, and even algebra in a way that the computer would understand.
Well, okay. My impression is that this makes sense, but I also think it will probably become something that a lot of platforms that try to teach math online will integrate in some form.
Yes, I agree that one thing that I think is that this is not that easy to implement. And I think that if we're able to implement this, it will be, we could sell it or negotiate it with these platforms that would really, really make use of it, and thereby get leverage or even revenue.
Well, my intuition is that it's not really defensible, but I might be wrong.
So you're saying that this is easy to do?
No, but I think that once somebody implements it, maybe in a form of an open source library or something like that, and it will basically be everywhere, and it won't be able to like sell it commercially.
So I really disagree, because I think that this is this is very, very difficult to implement. Somebody has already implemented it. I believe Mathematica. I'm of the belief that they have it, but it's not open source. And you don't like. There's this math.js library, right? JavaScript library doesn't have this. Obviously, it's very, very hard to implement. And also, there's different attributes about your implementation, right? Which theories do you support, and essentially all this stuff, and the how performant is it, etc. And the way we're going to implement it is for this very specific use case, which is to make a front-end app. So essentially, the people that understand formal methods in mathematics and specifically computer algebra, they, in my belief, haven't thought of this idea of creating an actual front-end application that would allow you to prove stuff and learn that way. So the biggest such platform, which I haven't mentioned yet, is called COQ, COQ, which has been around for about 20 years, and it's what's called a proof assistant. And this is what it looks like. So it's made by academics, for academics. That hasn't been updated in over 20 years, it seems. And the idea is, this validates what I was saying. The people understand this. They use this for academia. The four-color theorem in graph theory has been proved for the first time in COQ, in the COQ proof assistant, because the proof was so complex that they weren't able to do it on pen and paper. That to use executable methods, formal computer methods, to prove it. But these people think in academia. I haven't yet seen an attempt, apart from the textbook on logic, to turn this into widely used front-end application. And the reason is you really have to believe in self-learning and decentralized education to for this to have the most sense.
Okay, so this is open source?
This, I believe, it might be open source. And I want to build in JavaScript, and the reason for that is that it can also run locally. So like all these things connect, like the way you build it connects very, very closely with what you want to achieve with that, right? So if you use COG, then you have to run it on a server. That means every time you enter something, you have this lag of 500 milliseconds to get the response from the server. But if we actually build it in JavaScript, then every time you enter something, you will be able to get instant 0 millisecond lag feedback on whether it's correct or not. So these technical decisions then spiral out to have very important UX implications.
So it's about building a web front end for this, right?
So this is the command line tool, and then there will be a front end application.
Okay. And do you think it's hard for Khan Academy to take something like this and build it into?
I really think so. Like maybe I'm wrong, but I really think that this isn't trivial. Like writing libraries in general is trivial. To build math.js is not trivial. And then to build computer algebra implementing JavaScript. Like when I was thinking about this project, I actually looked up, there's some journals on computer algebra in the world. And then there's even experts in the field. There is one man which I found on Wikipedia, who lives in, he works at the University of Vienna, who is like the worldwide expert in computer algebra. And one of the possibilities is to invite him to be an advisor or to the project. So that's how hard I think it is to get the top level academics to be able to advise on this, because you really have to. Yeah, I mean.
No, I still think if you build a JavaScript library, it's really hard to prevent other people from just changing it a bit.
That's why we're not going to do it, or we can if we want to make it even more open and public, right? This is a business decision.
Okay.
Hey, so I just remembered where I used, I think, this the most, but I'm not particularly skilled in computer science, so tell me this is something different. But if you go to pages such as integration or derivative solver, you put in an integral or derivative, right? It solves it, and then it shows you the steps with like multiple procedures possible.
Totally,
So
totally
how?
agree. Very different. So the way that
Okay,
works is you enter an expression, a polynomial,
yeah, an
and
expression.
it has an algorithm to spit out the derivative.
Right, but this
So I could
essentially is
write
an
that
algorithm.
algorithm. I could write that algorithm in this file just here. So the difference. So the application that I'm writing right now, Pruvio, will also provide that. You will also be able to write in your chatbot interface, find the derivative of expression number A, and bam, it would spit it out. But the where these two projects differ is this isn't a straightforward algorithm that takes an input and puts an output. This is building the entirety of mathematical theory in a way that a computer would understand. It's building
Okay,
the quotation engine in JavaScript.
okay.
Okay. Well, my intuition is still that this is like a good selling point if you already have a platform that teaches math and has a lot of stuff about it around it, but I don't think it's something that can be sold really standalone. But I might be wrong.
I mean, I might also be wrong. Let's find out.
Okay.
Cool. I know
So
that I forgot one thing, which has been in the back of my mind for the last 20 minutes, but I can't remember it. So I'll follow up on that.
I wanted to ask a little bit of a practical question. I got to be honest, I went to grab some dinner, so I'm not sure if you already answered this. But if we go back to the original way it should work, because I think you introduced some new ideas from the last time we talked about it.
Okay.
So,
One sec, let me just get some water. I'm like super thirsty. Give me like 1
okay,
minute.
yeah, sure, I'll wait.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, right. So, my question, as I was saying, is a little more practical. So, if I say choose a learning path for, I want to become, I want to get skilled in computer science, so I start with some maths, yada yada yada. Is the branch thought out? So, do I have specific things I need to do, or um, so what I'm asking is, okay, I want to do this. Will Solvio give me the exact things I need to do, or do I need to go and look for it myself? Specifically, what I want to do in that field. Say I need to learn this, and I need to learn adding and subtracting, basic mathematics. So I look for multiple resources myself, or will it give me a specific resource to learn that from?
The answer is yes. It will give you a specific resource to learn it from. It will, in fact, give you a possibility to choose one of the resources. So, anyways, I can't find it now, but what I was going to show you is the Learnasa / Solvio Learn specification, where each topic or each resource has dependencies, and what was the question?
Well, it was more of a predecessor to my main question, but okay. So it will give me a specific resource to learn to get that skill that I then need to move on down the branch.
Any topic, so it will basically, it knows what you already know, and then it can just find the different path between what you know and what you need to know or want to know.
I think you disconnected your mic or something.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, but not that clearly as before.
I was just sitting back in my chair. So essentially, it will show you the difference between what you already know and what you want to know.
Right. So what I wanted to ask mainly was how much human contact will there be? Like, to what extent will I be learning at home, say like Khan Academy, or going to a place like a school where someone will be teaching it to me? Because then if it's going to be, if Solvio will give me all the resources, then this plan has to be very rigid in the sense of, okay, so you do 2 days of self-study at home right now, and then you have to go to some school that will have that course that will then give me that.
I fully agree with your question, and the answer is that it depends on you. So I kind of try to design the general system, right? But the actual learning system that I have some ideas about through my experience with teaching. I pointed out one of those examples is that with math, it's more likely that the course would be first, and then there would be self-teaching or solving problems. With humanities or practical sciences, I expect it to be the other way around. But there can be an entire marketplace or aggregator of these learning frameworks, successful or people telling or giving advice to students on which path to follow, which framework to follow, which learning framework. And then based on which framework you choose, you will be able to customize your own education experience. So yeah, the answer is it's so generic that there is no generic answer. You could either be doing fully everything self-taught. That's the advantage of this, that we allow anyone in the world to get a world-class education and get credentials for it for free.
Right,
or
but then
the whole thing in terms of short-term courses. It's all.
So now I get to my main point here. I think the largest pushback here then will be the fact that say high schools provide more than just a rigorous education, right? It's important to go to a place with people your age, interact with them, learn some social skills. School also teaches people manners, especially in primary school, and then less and less. But I think this is just focusing on the rigorous education part of it.
No. So
school has more value that it gives, right?
So I totally agree with you that there are so many things that above the core element of it, such as the things you mentioned. I couldn't agree more. And I think that Solvio provides those better. So you mentioned one of them. Which is friendships. So
yeah,
I studied at 1 year for university, and I actually have more lasting friendships, or more of them, from a 1.5 week stay in Silicon Valley with Oxford Entrepreneurs trip than through the 1 year of actually studying at the university. So I feel like these short-term courses strengthen relationships. You get to travel together and have an experience together. And much more than long-term going to school. But also there's another aspect, which is that you can actually like meet your friends, even your old friends, at various courses. So say somebody moved to UK and you guys were really good friends. Well, guess what? Now you can meet halfway and actually join a course together. So this actually allows the flexibility of maintaining relationships through your whole life. And there's like so many other advantages that I have in mind, like the whole flexibility of the framework that it's a little bit different, but it has to do with flexibility that allows you to drop out, try startup, try working, then go back to education. I think is incredibly one of the main selling points of this. Like Oxford University, on average, 1.5 years before from your decision to studying versus being able to if I drop out and then I decide to go back to school, I can start doing that right now. And another advantage that I just thought of, which I forgot to mention, is we're also kind of. So I wrote this white paper on Solvio some time ago, and in it I essentially mention under this chapter called unpleasant. I don't want to show my email right now because it's being recorded, but here, let me stop sharing my screen for 1 minute and actually show you the white paper that. Okay, I got it. So let me share my screen. Okay, so I actually wrote this white paper almost a year ago. And this has a much more comprehensive list of all the advantages. Just so many things from network effects. But then there's this one that I call unpleasant interactions that I also want to mention. It's on page 17. Okay, forget. I thought I had it in preview. Blah, blah, blah. And page 17 says the following thing. It says that only 31% of teachers think that their teacher makes school an exciting place to learn. This is a study from, and I have a specific HTML link to the study. And then there's another point, which is in the US alone, every day about 3.2 million students are victims of bullying. Even more strikingly, over 67% of students believe that schools respond poorly to bullying, with a high percentage of students believing that adult help is infrequent and ineffective. And also, every day, 160,000 teenagers skip school because of bullying. Our model makes bullying virtually unfeasible, as one can choose who he or she spends time with. Solving this massive societal issues at such a fundamental level is a big advantage of a model. Every student deserves the right to be brought up in a safe environment conducive to bring the best out of them. And another, final thing that I wanted to mention is 10% of students have been harassed. There's harassment student to student, staff to staff, and vice versa as well. And that can also be greatly diminished if you don't have to see the person repeatedly. And then there's also another aspect to it, which is not just student-to-student bullying, but also student-to-teacher in a way. Like as a teacher, I've had the privilege to teach 99% of students that wanted to learn, but there's nothing more disheartening for a teacher to teach somebody who doesn't want to learn. And this model has the incredible advantage that you only get students that want to learn. It's one of the major advantages for this model, and one of the reasons why I think that teachers will prefer this one over regular education. That's the first reason. The second reason is they can have freedom and a freelance life. Third reason is it's more likely to attract people who are self-learners and more motivated, this whole system, this whole model, and teachers like those students. And then there's another thing, which is that, people say that you don't get credentials for self-learning, but in my experience, it's exactly the opposite.
a company, like it requires passion and interest and enthusiasm to self-learn, as I said, as well as discipline and responsibility. And companies and universities realize this, and they actually value those students more than somebody. I even saw discussion saying like, yeah, if you think you can learn it yourself, learn it yourself. If you think you can't do it, enroll in a university. Like implying that that it's seen as preferred by colleges and employers if you can learn something yourself. And the final thing that I wanted to mention was, yeah, I think that's it actually. Okay, so let me, oh, so Tunda is leaving. Yes, I do have a link to the white paper. Anyways, I will attach it. I will attach it later, if that's okay. Yeah, I know that I wanted to say one more thing, but it's okay. I'll think of it sometime. So essentially, in the white paper, I think this is a very useful diagram. Formal education has things like high schools, then things like these recognized exams, and then they lead to universities, which lead to internationally recognized degrees. And informal education is you have all these amazing informal education providers like Khan Academy, Brilliant.org, real life courses, and then you have Solvio Advance. And for university, you have a different set of content providers, and then you have Solvio Advance. It's the missing link between education and credentials. These are credentials. This is learning. It's the missing link between learning and credentials. By the way, the names here of the apps are different. So Content Hunt is now called Solvio Learn. Problem Hunt is now called Pruvio. And Course Hunt is now called Solvio Learn as well. So yeah. Albert, could you repeat your question? Maybe I can remember.
My question, which one do you mean? We're talking about the other, say, positive externalities of traditional schooling.
Okay, so which one did you mention?
That going to a school gives you, say, a certain set of morals and human contact, interacting with people your age, stuff like that. That's what we're talking about.
Got it. Do you feel like I answered your question as well as provide some more arguments why this is a good idea?
Yeah, no, I think I got to understand it a little better, the way you mean, Salvio. But still, I believe the largest pushback will be the fact that nobody will be giving morals and manners, especially as you develop this app for younger kids. Because in the Czech Republic, there literally is a position that's called vychovatelka. How would you translate that to English? A person who.
It's actually in English. It's called a counselor. It's called a counselor.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I guess that's how it's in international schools.
Anyways, Yeah.
But let me maybe just say that this problem can also be solved by the fact that you're not necessarily abolishing schools. You can make schools more efficient by, say, making centers that will be specialized in, I don't know, chemistry, mathematics, where then you could go to, you could do some self-studying, then go there for a lecture and do some experiments, say, if you're doing chemistry. So like these institutions can still exist there. So
Definitely.
It's just advancing. Yeah.
Totally agree. Cool. Anyone have the last question? Actually, I think, okay, maybe we should end it here. I think somebody posted in the chat. So Alex, so Jeff is saying that he really liked it. Donda as well. Alex posted a link which I will ask for later, and then Jakub wrote some time ago. How many parts of this project? Jakub, did you write this before you spoke? Here, I'll copy the whole chat because there's interesting stuff. Cool. Well, thanks a lot. And if I remember this thing that I forgot to mention, I'll totally let you guys know. I'll follow up. And hopefully soon I'll get a discourse hosting thanks to this call. If not, then I will buy my own. It costs $100 per month. And there we can actually start discussing everything, which I'll be super excited about. So in summary, I don't want to create a WhatsApp group. I don't want to create a Slack. I want this to be as public of a discussion because I want this to be not a project that I'm doing, but a project that the world is doing. And so that implies its own collaboration and governance structure. And
on an ending note.
Sorry?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask on an ending note is if Solvio has any social media to follow this project on.
Right now we're only on GitHub, and we will soon be on Discourse, and then we'll be on Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining, and farewell.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See you later, guys.